Will you join me on a murder hunt around the remote west coast of the Scottish Highlands? It's a bit like an 18th century version of Cluedo. We know the victim. We know the murder weapon. We know the location where the murder took place. All we need to do is find out who the real murderer is. The British government think they know who did it. But can we be sure? Are we certain that an innocent man is going to be executed for a crime he never committed? On this tour on the hunt of the Appin murderer, we need to look at the clues. We need to rule out many suspects before we can be certain who the real murderer is. So will you join me on that hunt for the Appin murderer and piece all the clues together? Hi, I'm Andrew Baxter. I'm a green badge guide here in the beautiful Scottish Highlands, and you join me in my little cubby hole deep in the mountains near Glencoe, just a few miles away from where the Appin murder took place. It's great to see so many of you join us on this tour from around the world. Now, before we get started, just a few reminders about how this virtual tour operates. So there's a chat function on this Zoom meeting, so you can introduce yourselves during the tour. But now can I ask you to switch off your video feed and switch off your audio at the moment? That means that we get the best bandwidth possible. There's no hiccups or lag during the tour whatsoever. I will be stopping at various points during the tour, so you can ask me plenty of questions. And the whole tour will last about 45 minutes, and we'll have plenty of time towards the end for you to ask questions. And who knows, maybe it gives you the opportunity to say who you think who done it. Or maybe we'll be left none the wiser. So let's get started. If you just bear with me whilst I get my screen up so you can see where we're heading to. This bit always takes a little bit of time, never a particularly quick process. So let's get everything sorted there. Make sure it's all running tip top so we can get going. So the magnifying glass shows us where we're heading, the mountains around Glencoe and Appin. And I thought it would be useful to go up in my tour guide helicopter for a closer look as to where we're going to explore on today's tour. So first of all, we're going to zoom straight in and head in to where our story starts on the banks of the narrows that separate Loch Leven from Loch Linney. And then we're going to head across that water to the mountains beyond, to the murder site itself, where in a wooden glade, our victim was shot through the back and fell from his horse. We're going to hear his last dying words, and we're going to find out a bit about one of the suspects seen running from the scene before we head to a place where an argument took place between our victim and the chief suspect, and ultimately the man that paid the price for the crime. We're going to head down to the accused house in the very heart of Glendura, a rich, fertile glen, and the very heart of Clan Stewart territory. Before we head over the hillsides, over the forests to the victim's house, we're going to find out a bit about him, his background, his motives, and what people thought of him and the reasons why they wanted him dead. Before we head to the county town of Argyll and this church where the trial took place, we'll find out the outcome of that trial, but more importantly, whether it was a fair trial and whether the evidence presented there was entirely accurate. And then right at the end of the tour, we'll end up back on the narrow piece of water where our chief suspect was eventually executed on a wooded knoll just a few hundred yards across the water from where our story will commence today. So that is where we're heading. That's where we're going to find the clues as to who the real Appin murderer is. So let's get going and start at the very beginning by giving you a bit of a background and set the scene as to what was happening in this part of the Highlands in 1752, just 6 years after the Battle of Culloden. And here we are at Castle Stalker, the seat of a mighty clan, the Clan Stuart of Appin, a great Jacobite supporters. And we're joined in this story by another clan in these parts, the mighty Clan Campbell, led by the Duke of Argyll. Now, the Duke of Argyll and the Campbells are supporters of the United Kingdom. They're supporters of the Hanoverian monarchy, and they're extremely loyal to this man, the German-born King George II. Whereas Clan Stuart are the rebels. They're Jacobites. They're supporters of this man, James Francis Edward Stuart, otherwise known as James VIII of Scotland or James III of England, the old pretender, the king over the water, the son of the deposed King James VII and II, who had gone into exile in 1689. And we're joined by someone else that's involved in this story, this man, Robert Louis Stevenson, that famous author of books like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But in this story, he wrote the novel Kidnapped, that rip-roaring adventure of David Balfour and Alan Breck Stewart that romanticized the story of the Appin murder. And we're going to have a look at some of the tales he wove into his story that are based on the real life events. So let's head and start at the very beginning. On the morning of 14th of May, 1752, 3 men jumped upon their horses' saddles in Fort William, a town just about 10 miles north of where I stand today. And they headed alongside the banks of Loch Linney until they got to this spot in Ballachulish. And it's here they waited for the ferryman to row across the fast tidal narrows behind me to take them across to the wooded hills beyond. At the head of that party was one Colin Roy Campbell of Glenure, otherwise known as the Red Fox. He was the king's factor in these parts, and he was heading to the very heart of Clan Stuart of Appin territory across the water from where I stand. He was heading to relieve them of their money as he collected their rents, and rumours abounded that he was about to evict many of them from their homes. He was heading into enemy territory, and one thing was for sure, it wasn't going to end well. So you need to join me on the other side to find out where the story heads to next. See you in a moment. So there we are, with the magic of technology. We've zipped across those narrows. We didn't have to wait for the ferryman, although that ferry remained all the way up until 1975, replaced by the bridge that you could see behind me in that video clip. So we're now in an area known as Ballachulish, and Colin Campbell and his riding party would have headed here to Ballachulish, which is now a lovely golf course, really popular with golfers, and possibly one of the most scenic golf courses in the Scottish country. It's called the Dragon Tooth. There are, we're looking towards the Dragon Tooth now, that geological hump spike up in the foreground of the mountains there behind at the golf clubhouse. But Colin Campbell wasn't heading to play golf. There certainly wasn't a golf course there. His first stop on his journey was this place, Ballachulish House. He passed here, he paused here as they headed towards the woodland track above Loch Linney. Now, this house stood there in 1752. In fact, parts of it are much older. It was the place where the warrant for the Glencoe massacre was signed in 1691. And nearby, in a yew tree, the murder weapon, a musket used to fire the fatal shot that downed Colin Campbell, was found here. Today, it is a rather nice bed and breakfast, having previously been a much lamented and lost Michelin star restaurant during the 1990s. And we're going to head on now on horseback into the woods of Lettermore.